Hi, this is Connie, the Prairie Mom. Some days are sitting kinds of days, so I thought we'd just have a little conversation this evening while I sit here and drink a little cup of tea. I wanted to tell you a little bit. We've talked to my sister every day about her mini starter, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about my Max. So this messy jar is my Max starter. I've had a starter going pretty consistently since about 1998, and there's been a few times in there that I let it go and had to start over again, but we've had a lot of sourdough bread over the years. So this is my Max, and I think that I started this one in about 2009, so that'd put him 10 or 11 years old. I keep my sourdough very differently than my sister, whereas Suzanne keeps hers out and it's new and it's fresh and it's fun, and she uses that starter to add to whatever she's baking to create cakes and breads and all the things for her family. I prefer to use mine and do all my baking once a week, all my sourdough baking once a week. So that is the reason that my little Max starter, this is him. This is what I keep in my refrigerator. And I keep 2 of these, and I kind of rotate which one I use each week. I just pull one out and I move it to this big jar, and then I begin to feed it. And I will feed this 3 to 4 times in the 24 to 36 hours leading up to the day I want to bake. And so I'll start out feeding it just a half a cup, and then maybe a cup, and then maybe a couple of cups, and then maybe even 2 more cups again. It depends on what all I want to bake that day, so how much starter I'm gonna need. But that's what I do with mine. And then when it's really super bubbly and it's really fresh, I will refill my jar and put it back in the refrigerator, and then everything that I have left I will use to bake with. So sometimes that means it stays out for a couple of days and I continue to bake odds and ends. Most often though, it really means that I bake everything in that one day that we're gonna eat for the most part. So that's my Max starter. I've never had a sourdough starter that was started with yeast until Suzanne started her mini starter with yeast. All of mine have always been wild yeast, slow risen. I honestly don't know a lot of the differences as far as how they will react to the same recipes, so we're going to be learning that together. And the reason that I started mine was because of my son's allergies and sensitivities, so we wanted to have the benefit of a really long ferment and a really slow rise. So I've always just, slow dough has been good for me, so that's the reason that I still bake with slow dough. So a lot of my recipes, even the ones that only have 1 rise, that rise will be maybe 5 or 6 hours at room temperature, or maybe 12 to 14 hours in the refrigerator. And sometimes it'll even take 24 to 36 hours for me to make a recipe at all. So I just do a little bit and then I set it aside, or do a little bit and then move it to the refrigerator. And so that's kind of the rhythm of my sourdough. Somebody asked me a question: how do I know when my starter will rise bread? Well, there's a lot of ways to answer that, and none of them will be accurate all the time. Sourdough is its own unique entity. It is individual to every household. It is individual to every person. Even if they have the same starter source, when it moves to another house, it's going to take on a little bit different properties. So you have to get to know your starter. You have to kind of work with it, live with it, and y'all have to kind of become friends together. and develop a relationship together. So how do you know when your starter is ready to rise bread? Well, the simple answer is it will double in a reasonable amount of time, at least double. Max has already risen and then fallen a little bit. Now, let me also tell you that I'm trying to work a little bit of a day ahead of you. So I have fed these already twice today, and I'm fixing to feed them again. So I wanted to have a full jar of the Max starter by in the morning. So he's fallen again, and I'll stir him down and feed him one more time so that by in the morning I'll have a full jar of this so that I can bake a loaf of the bread. I'm going to use the same recipe for both Max and Minnie, just to see, so that we can see how they respond differently. And I wanted to be able to do that on my own and have that information to share with you on the video in a couple of days. I honestly am not 100% sure that he is ready today. I really think he will be better in 3 or 4 days, but the recipe that I've chosen to use for tomorrow I think is going to work fine. It has a little bit of yeast added, so it's not a true traditional sourdough, but I think it'll give us a good idea of what we can look for in the differences between the two. And obviously the difference that y'all have most identified with is that one is thick and one is thin, and one works a lot faster than the other one. And that Minnie, she will rise up and fall and be all the way fallen before Max ever really gets off the ground. There's a turtle and a hare thing going on over here. But Minnie is great. Since we've really worked on thickening her up, she's holding her bubbles a lot better. She's holding that lift. And she is still, even 8 hours later, she rose all the way to here, and then she's fallen. You can see a little bit of where she is now to here. And but there is still an even distribution of bubbles all the way through her. She does not have the fermented smell that Max does. So he's got a little bit more going on fermentation wise, but I believe that's because we added the yeast to her. So we've got to, it's going to take a little bit longer for the some natural fermentation to happen here. And so we're getting a lot of rise and fall, but we don't have a lot of actual fermentation yet. So it will happen. It'll happen. Someone also asked, how do I have 3 cups of starter? Because yesterday I was making waffles and I had 3 extra cups of starter, and y'all are only getting a cup off of Minnie and a half a cup off of Max. Well, she asked, did I hold that over from the morning to the evening? And that's certainly sometimes something I do. More often I will hold whatever I discard in the evening over into the morning so that I've got extra in the morning for morning baking. So these though were held over from the baking this afternoon, and so I've got some extra of the Mini and the Max. And part of the reason also is because I am still working with my old culture. So I've got my starter from years ago, and then I've got some Mini that I have off of my sister that I've been using to work with some of these recipes. So a lot of testing going on, a lot of I'm working with 4 starters here instead of just 2, so I'm coming up with a lot of extra discard that needs to be used up, which that leads me to the recipe of the day today. I'm not sure how many of you have been to England or had crumpets. I've never been to England, but let me tell you, my family is a fan of crumpets. You know already that I love the history of food, and I like, I think crumpet recipes are super old, developed maybe in Wales. They have a form of a crumpet in Scotland, but I think it's more like a pancake, a little bit flat. they have them in England, obviously. Crumpets are different from English muffins because while they're similar in some ways, English muffins are a dough and crumpets are from a batter. And one of the great things about crumpets is you don't do anything. It's sort of like those pancakes. Your sourdough, like this right here, that's the base of it. There's no extra flour added. There's nothing. You just add a little salt, a little sugar, and then the baking soda is used to give them their lift. And so you want your batter, you want it to be an actual batter before you add your baking soda. So if you're working with Max, you're gonna need to thin it slightly with a little bit of water because it's so thick. So, but Minnie, obviously she is all sloshing around over there. And these were made with Minnie this afternoon, and I didn't do a thing to this, but add salt and sugar and baking soda, and that was it. So and then they bake up. Let me see, here's one you can see. All right, so like you can buy these fancy little crumpet rings, I think. I don't have any of those, but what do I have? Where's my, oh, right here. I have canning jar lids, and so if you'll set those on your griddle and let your griddle preheat, you want to grease them. So I just brush them with a little coconut oil. I set them on my griddle and I let them get hot as the griddle was preheating. And while the griddle was preheating, I just mixed in my salt and sugar. I think that's all that's in them, salt and sugar. But anyway, I mixed that in and got it whipped up good. And then right before, when my griddle was hot and everything was ready, I put just a touch of grease. I used a little butter, anything that you could even use a spray so you don't get too much. It just needs a little so they don't stick. And you just put a little bit in the center of each ring on your griddle, and add your baking soda, and it's gonna go boom, as my sister would say. And you're gonna have this huge fluffiness that you scoop into each thing, and you can see these little holes. You let it cook on one side. Now, there's some discrepancy of their traditionally, are they ever turned over? Well, I like mine a little brown, so I turn mine over. But you're supposed to cook them until they're mostly done on the top even. But I do turn mine over, so I'm not really sure about that. But you can see the holes. And the batter is so thin that it allows the air to bubble up through the bottom and just to pop out and escape at the top, and it leaves you with this nice little airy texture. They're soft, a little bit chewy, really, really good. All my kids love them. They like making maybe breakfast sandwiches with them. They like having them with butter and jam, or just buttered on the side of the meal. Crumpets, that's the recipe of the day today. And it's another great way to use up a lot of sourdough starter. I'm gonna talk with my sister for just a little bit longer, and we're gonna keep going. It is day 7. So we're gonna feed our sourdough just like we have been. Feed it in the morning, feed it in the evening, and then tomorrow I will let you know exactly what we need to do to get ready to bake bread. Y'all have a blessed evening.
So this has been fun.
It's worth the trouble.
Oh, for this it certainly is, at least at this time.
Yes.
And plus I know that when my life gets crazy busy again, as it would normally be normal for me to be,
right,
something every single night, you know, with the kids at school, or, you know, playing basketball or singing or whatever it is that they're doing, I can put him in the fridge and not have to feed him twice a day and bake with him once a day and all that. knowing that there will, when I do want to use Clint, I'll take him out like the night before, at least. I'll give him a good 12 hours.
Yeah.
But it's taken me a little while. And the other thing was texture. That was it. The texture. For me, the happy place for Clint, for me, I want it to pour. And see, that's just a hair thick right there. So if I was feeding it this time, I'd add a little more,
extra water.
A little more hot water from the tap.
And that's a personal preference. So you can, if you like yours super thin, then you can keep it thin. If you like working with it thicker, then that is fine as well. The little bit of fermentation that occurs at the top, there's a liquid that will develop at the top, and it will often develop faster on thinner starters. So, so you might have that, but we're going to talk about that in the days to come, because that's really not even a negative. It's just another thing for you to know.
It's just another factor, and it's part of what makes your sourdough sour. So if you want your sourdough to not be sour, my advice, add sour, because it can get to the point of being bitter, and not everybody's ready for that action.
Right.
You can pour off the layer.
Hooch. It's called hooch.
It's alcohol. I wouldn't drink it.
Definitely not.
I don't think that'd be fun at all. No. But you pour that off if you want to keep yours with a milder flavor.
Yes.
So a lot of this seriously is getting to make friends with your starter and learning what works for you, and what the rhythm, because the rhythm, it's all about rhythm on this deal.
It is.
And I you know, like I say, it's been kind of fun. When this is over, I will still be using the sourdough, and I'll still be putting it in things. And I will be watching on how to make sourdough bread, not
brick. Not sourdough brick, sourdough bread.
If the chickens won't eat it, it's not good.
That's true. That's true. We'll work on the bread part.
And maybe I'll get there. And if not, I'll just eat yours.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.
I really appreciate my sister Suzanne taking the time to visit with us as we are getting started on our journey. Her experience as a new sourdough person can give us some insight and wisdom that I really didn't think about, because I've been doing it for a while. So I really appreciate her time. I really appreciate her sharing her recipes. I've got some recipes to go up on the website so that y'all can have some new recipes of hers there. If you've enjoyed these videos, I would really appreciate it if you would comment and let me know, share them with a friend, maybe subscribe to my channel, and I will have new videos up at least a couple of times a week after this little sourdough series is over. We're going to continue to share recipes with you there. You can also follow me on social media at the Prairie Mom 12 on Instagram and the Prairie Mom on Facebook. I love interacting with you there. It's a little better way for me to connect with you and answer your questions and get to know you a little bit and where you are in your sourdough journey. Thank you so much for joining us. Y'all have a blessed evening.